Welcome to the Leadership of Fools. We are about to launch straight into a whiz-bang episode. We're going to do things a little differently today. I think we're going to go through a little list. I mean, we don't often go a list, but today we're going a list. And to my left, always happy to go a list, is Colin Beattie.
Thank you, Ricky. I do love a list. I grew up in an era where the mixtape or the top 5 list become
David Letterman.
David Letterman. In the day, yeah, that's right.
Giving you comedy lists.
Yes,
You really pioneered it. Steve Vizard stole it. Little did we know, because we had no access to David Letterman back then.
We thought it was a Steve Vizard original.
Steve Vizard doing his top 10 countdown. Or
Those
top
of you
7.
out there, you'll need to Google Steve Vizard, I reckon.
I don't think Wikipedia goes back that far.
No, look up the history, the sordid history of Australian television.
And I was excited when we were doing a top 10, so I'm quite pumped to be here.
Nothing makes me happier than when we've pumped you up a little bit with our topic of conversation. Someone who I hope is equally as pumped is Alice Sidhu. How are you going?
Hey everyone, I'm very, very excited.
How do you feel about lists?
I don't mind a list or two.
That's what I like, just adequate, just above ambivalence.
Well, the thing I want to know is, what's on the list?
Yeah.
Are we counting down or up?
I know, these are the
and
tough
I
things.
love, the thing I do love about lists is that you unveil them slowly. So you get to, like a fine wine, savour it, decide, did that make the cut? Is it a good list or is it not? Should I go further? So I love that curiosity factor.
Well, it causes debate.
It does.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
I hope there'll be plenty of that.
And it's, look, I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is a pretty self-serving list, but they're my favourite kind of lists because they're the ones I can truly get behind. So the list that we're going to go through today, I think we're going to count down, guys. Start at 10 and work our way down to 1. But in no particular order. No, definitely not.
You've thrown me. You've thrown us all.
I'd like to look at the top 10 reasons every organisations need podcasting. I mean, we are a podcast, so if we can, just really get to the nuts and bolts of this, that's going to help us no end. So if everyone's happy with that as a list, then let's soldier on.
Absolutely.
Starting at number 10, as per aforementioned counting down. Podcasting is conversations with the benefit of scale. Talk us through that, Colin.
Podcasting are conversations. Conversations are different to a lot of things that especially organisational life is used to, like keynote speaking events or scripted notes or... I can't even think. What am I trying to say, Alice?
I'm not sure.
I'm being serious.
All the things in
organisations. It's only list number 10 and I'm already lost.
So it's something I guess organisations aren't necessarily tapped into, or they haven't tapped into the full potential of podcasting, and they've got certain ways of delivering messages now, as you've mentioned, your video, your sort of town hall or your Q&A panel sessions, all these things are sort of your standard ways of getting a message out there or getting
your newsletter, your email, your...
So they cover information this way, and they get messaging out this way. But you've got to say podcasting is an untapped resource almost in terms of messaging and getting conversation started, because that's what it is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So the whole point of this piece, though, is the scalability of podcasts, which means you can listen to them anywhere, anytime, and for organisations that are geographically dispersed, so they may be multinationals. Not only that, but people work remotely as well. They work different hours, so there's all sorts of flexibility around where they are, and so you can listen to it anywhere, anytime, and you can listen to it again, and go back and listen to your favourite bits, because hopefully there are some as well.
Yeah, because you're taking that conversation and you're amplifying it. You're giving it a forum, a soapbox.
Alice, can you and I talk a little bit more about scale? Because I think that's what's at the heart of this. So the ability, I love the piece about getting it out to remote areas all at the same time.
That's right. And so we know that now everybody is geographically, dispersed, as I said earlier. And so for organisations, how do you make sure that the person who is not in head office, for example, or in it might be a client site, it might be in a branch office, depending on what industry you're in, how does that person access it? Then you have things like shift work and so forth. You have school pickups, you have sick leave. So if you're on a holiday, does it mean that you can't hear it? And again, as I said, if you want to hear it again, you can go back and listen to your favourite bits. And the whole point is that you can reflect on it and say that was real. So the point you made earlier about the fact that it's a conversation and the fact that you can access that conversation no matter where you are gives it an intimacy that's a little bit different.
It doesn't have to be a conversation, although that's our bias.
That is our bias, yes.
Yeah. So what we mean by that is you could actually have it somewhat scripted, and it can almost still present as a.
It could be a radio play, guys. You can have
It could be a
sound
radio
effects.
play.
I mean,
In fact,
should we have a Leadership of Fools radio play at some point?
why not?
Just floating
like
it out there,
that.
guys. Next
Why not?
Fringe Festival.
Have you seen our acting skills?
Mate, don't you sell yourself short. I believe in each and every one of you in this room. And if we can't put on a Leadership of Fools radio play, then we're not trying.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. The conversation part says that you could have the unscripted conversation, the reconciling, working things out. That piece can actually kick in as well in terms of a podcast. And that would be great to see organisations take that mature step. And I suspect we will come back to that throughout the top 10.
Yeah.
But I think it is a maturity in terms of an organisation that's looking to be very much authentic and use engagement to be able to actually make it conversational.
If you're not podcasting, grow up. That's what we're saying. That's what we're excellently done. Number 9 on the list, counting down, is that podcasting is digital and has a cool factor. I mean, if you say you've got a cool factor, that reduces your cool factor by about 100%.
So
you need
already we've dialed that down.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would suggest
Note to self.
don't say that you've got a cool factor.
Okay. Digital.
Yeah.
Alice.
Okay. I like the intent with which you said that.
Alice, one of season 1 episodes, you reminded me of the obvious, and the obvious was we're doing digital right now, and I was not even
Aware of it? Yeah.
You've been afraid of digital this whole time, Colin, and the whole time you've been doing it.
I have.
Well, you've been on your phone downloading apps.
Yeah, that's right.
And internet banking.
I'm
and
not ready for
Skyping.
digital transformation.
You're 90% digital, Colin.
No. Oh my God.
You just didn't know it.
I'm not even real.
That's your avatar, that's right.
You're halfway through the movie Tron and you didn't even know it. I'm just going real obscure references. This whole list. That's my thing. That's my
okay.
contribution.
Steve Izard.
Steve Izard. Tron. I mean, if the kids aren't enjoying my content, I don't know what kids are listening.
Well, this is the point of podcasts. We're encouraging curiosity because everybody should be Googling if they don't know the references, right?
What's a
There you
Tron?
go. So podcasting is digital. It's a digital way of communicating. And the thing about that is it creates and integrates technology into what is a human experience, which is a conversation or a discussion or a dialogue or a presentation, because as you just said, there are many different ways to do that. And so when we're talking, I guess, about all the things that create, conflict within us as digital, the conversation becomes, are we going to, where does humanity stay? And are we all going to be made redundant in this age of robots and AI? Podcasts are almost the best of digital, and they're the best of digitization because they allow us to enable ourselves in different ways with technology. So it's a perfect complement, when we talk about in technology, man and machine. To me, it's really, really great way of saying you can actually do both, and when you have both working well together, it's magic.
This is a mic drop moment.
Really?
Yeah, it is. Like, that is so well. I don't know. It's
Well
so well
articulated.
Really?
Nailed it. Colin's touched.
I'm touched. I'm actually quite moved.
He's got a tear in his eye.
We're only at number 9.
Okay, so what you did say
Yeah.
was that it's the best of digital.
It is because what we can do now is have this conversation and we're recording it because we want to be able to share it.
It's the modern version of the family gathering around the wireless, which
Yeah.
has a romantic feel to it
Yeah.
when you think back to it. And people seem very happy to digest their entertainment in that way, and we look fondly back on that. And this is kind of the reimagining of that situation, which, as you say, makes it the best of digital.
Yeah, and you just said you had a moment, and I appreciate that, and I love that now too, so I feel like I'm having a moment. And so when we talk about technology and humanity, that's it. It's a moment, and that we're capturing for posterity.
And in terms of the cool factor, I guess what we're getting at there, or the point around that is that people are starting to embrace listening to podcasts as a very viable way of digesting information, and as relaxing and something to do when they're in transit. Like people are really have been on board for quite some time, and more people are accepting that podcasting is a nice way to receive information and to embrace entertainment and to do all those things.
And Rik, just
It's cool, guys. It's cool.
perhaps a need to redeem myself as well. Kieran Fitzpatrick, guest on season 1, was the person who looked me in the eye and said, I'm really keen to integrate podcasting into our organisation because
of the
this,
cool
this,
factor.
and this. And finally, his final word was, and because it's cool. So I just wanted to...
Yeah, look, I'm
Just wanted to
I'm gonna
feel
back
better
you up.
about that.
Yeah,
for a
I'm going to
moment.
back you up. All
Thank
right,
you.
I think we can make Cool Factor cool again.
Yes.
All right, if anyone can,
Let's do that.
This podcast can.
Can I go back to
I'm going to make it. We should do a radio play about Cool Factor. Our radio play is called Cool Factor, guys.
So we're going to do radio plays,
Yeah.
and we're going back to sitting around the radio in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
And if I can just extend that, I think the best podcast you do feel like you want to be part of the conversation, or you
actually feel like you are.
actually feel like you are.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of the best feedback we got from season 1 were things like, I had one person say I was kind of yelling at the podcast, at the device that I was listening it to, yelling because I wanted to ask a follow-up question, and I think they were yelling at me because apparently I didn't ask the right question.
Jeez, Colin.
But at least I thought they were really engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to find out more about your bike club, which was touched on briefly in season 1, and I still don't think we found out enough about your childhood bike
Maybe
club.
this could be the radio play the bike club.
Absolutely. I'm imagining our radio
I'm
play.
actually just saying hello. We're videoing at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we are multimedia moguls.
We're digital.
We are digital.
Yeah, I'm imagining our radio play will only be broadcast. We'll set up art installations around the city of old wirelesses that's just playing our radio play podcast on loop. And so people, in order to hear our radio play podcast, you have to gather around the wirelesses established around the city. It's going to be, it's a movement, guys. It's
I
a
know
movement.
it's not what you meant to convey, but I had an image of propaganda. The very 1984
I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that.
came to mind, and so I apologise, and I'm sharing in the spirit of what we said conversations are all about, and
Yeah.
you never quite know what's going to happen.
Our radio play will have an aggressively conservative agenda,
Okay.
if that helps you or hinders you at all.
Okay.
Let's move on. So, 10, 9, we're up to 8, guys. That's how counting goes. It's user-friendly.
You talked about this before, Alice. To extend this, the user experience is one in which you can listen to podcasts while multitasking. Let's think about all the things you could be doing. You could be in the garden. You could be riding your bike. You could be walking to work. You could be on the train, the tram, the bus, the driverless car,
It's
the
my
Uber.
number one hanging out clothes on the clothesline activity is podcasting. Listening to podcasts. Gets me through my laundry. Easy.
Why not?
It's a good distraction.
Highly recommend. Yep.
How many
chore.
podcasts can you get through in a 15K run? Alice?
Depends how long they are. Sorry. Damn it, that should have been an easy question. I feel like I
know.
failed you,
I know,
Colin.
That's okay. That's okay.
That's just a basic time situation.
Actually, it's
You've
a
asked.
mathematics there.
That was a stupid question. Someone is now yelling at their device.
Duh.
If you're listening
goodness
to
sake.
Duh, Colin.
Hardcore Histories is like a 4 to 6 hour podcast.
Yeah.
That's right.
so-
It is too.
I actually like to listen to about 35-minute. I
That
think that's
feels
a good,
about right
Yeah,
for you.
it's funny. I've actually got a routine. I do not always run with a podcast or music. Sometimes I like the whole tune out thing, but I always listen to them when I'm walking to the market. So I live in the city. The market's a couple of k's away, and so I take my shopping bags, my podcasts, and I feel like I'm geared up for the trip, and it's great. It's great.
I did find it difficult listening to comedy podcasts when I was jogging because if I would laugh, it would ruin get me
Oh,
out
the
of
rhythm?
get me
Your
out of step.
breathing.
Yeah. So that might be the only limitation in terms of user friendliness is that you need to know whether you can keep your rhythm going when you're jogging if you're laughing.
The other thing I'll say about user-friendly is that podcasts are available on many different platforms. And so no matter, which one you may have a particular loyalty or preference for, you can find them across different suites. So that means that the diversity gives you choice about what it is that you want. So that's part of the user experience as well.
And if you don't have any devices, then you can just find one of our easily accessible wireless art installations that will be popping up around the city with our aggressively conservative podcast streaming non-stop. That's another way for you to
If
digest.
I link it back to organisational needs just for a moment, that
If you have to.
it's that piece where a lot of effort and energy is often put into something like, say a town hall event, and which is very powerful and can be very engaging. So in no way trying to diss a town hall event. The issue might be that not everyone can access that. So through a podcast, they get to listen in their own time, through their own device, their own platforms, in their own way, doing whatever else they want to do at that time. So I just think there's a whole lot of upside to the user experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 7 on the list of top 10 reasons every organisation needs podcasting is executives like podcasting more than speaking to video or live audiences.
Now, I just want
Broad
to qualify this
generalisation.
one. Yes, it's a very broad
What
generalisation.
data group have you got?
Yes. This is a hypothesis.
You imagine.
I imagine.
Number 7, Colin imagines executives like podcasting more than speaking to video or live audiences. And who are we to deny Colin his hopes and dreams?
Here's my take on it. Having been an executive coach, advisor, consultant, and helping executives to be at their peak performance in moments like doing something on video, doing something in front of a live audience, or doing something that relates to a podcast, the anxiety levels drop away quite significantly with podcasting. So the anxiety drops away, the person kicks in, the real person that is, and you get to see the real authentic person earlier. And
That's
I think
really
it's
powerful. So why is that?
I think it's because you get to not look at the camera, or let's start with what is potentially the hardest, the audience. So if it is speaking in front of an audience, public speaking, that you're not feeling that comfortable with, or that causes you anxiety or stress or whatever it might be, that's a tough ask. Tough ask to be yourself and be very authentic. I just sense we get to see someone quite different on stage. Number 2, in front of a video, I think there's something about the edge or the underlying sense that I'm performing, and I need to, I don't know, what's the words? It's that sense of this substitutes, the camera substitutes for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you're podcasting, and I can feel it right now, feel like I'm just in conversation with you, Alice, and with you, Rik. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of big mics in the way, and every so often I have to look through the mic.
Makes it more exciting. It's coy.
Yeah, it is coy.
It's mischievous.
But there is
Are
a
you
point.
flirting again, Rik?
Yeah, there's usually a point sometime, maybe 2 or 3 minutes into this podcast hitting record, that I'm not even noticing we're in
and
podcast form.
And you're right. It's the removal of that focal audience point. So when you're live speaking, the audience is right there, and you're performing to that audience. When there's a camera there, that substitutes for that. So you're performing to the camera.
Yeah.
With this, in a podcast, you're aware that it will be for an audience, but it becomes about interacting. You're looking at the people that you're talking with, and so it's a very different method of I guess delivering to an audience, because you're removed from that audience expectation and that audience pressure, I guess.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say it's not almost or sometimes around the presentation to the audience. It's actually about the intimidation factor. So some people are actually very comfortable in front of an audience.
Yes.
Not everyone is, and so it's not. It's not unheard of to be very concerned about being focused on, how is it going to come out, et cetera, More importantly, it's, am I going to be okay? Am I going to get the words out, as opposed to, so it's not about them, it's about how you're feeling going into that. And so this is really interesting, because this becomes about just having, as you said, the conversation or the discussion, if it's a more formal style.
Absolutely.
I think the other thing that we might even cover again later in this top 10, but I think the other thing is podcasting seems to celebrate imperfection, whereas other platforms or forums, like in front of an audience or even in front of a video, don't celebrate that. They're looking for more perfection.
Yeah. You accept a lack of polish.
Yes.
You expect a lack of
You
polish.
expect it. Yeah.
I am glad to say I do not believe we are letting our listeners down today.
That's right.
Colin keeps
That's
getting me back
probably
for
the
a
nicest
reason.
thing you've ever said to me.
Yeah.
We are meeting
Yeah.
expectations.
And so what are we up to? 6. We're up to 6, guys. 6. This is really testing my ability to count backwards. Number 6 on the list, top 10 reasons every organisation needs podcasting. It's a trusted source. It's democratic. I mean, that is kind of cryptic, Colin. What's going on there? Trusted source. It's democratic.
Democratic, I'll start there. Democratic in that everyone can have a podcast.
That's true.
There's, let's estimate how much it might cost. It could cost the amount of an Apple iPhone or an iPhone, although I'll qualify this. We are in a great studio with a great audio engineer.
Oh, the way we do it, it's
and
very
high
expensive.
quality,
I mean, it is.
expensive.
The overheads are huge.
That's right. Microphone equipment.
My rider is amazing. Like the things,
That's exactly
the things I
right.
demand in order to sit in this chair
I mean,
are becoming unwieldy at best.
So,
You haven't told him it's his last show?
yeah, that's right. The budget is.
I defy you
wiped.
to find someone as unpolished as me. Your podcast will become far too polished if I'm not here, Colin, and you know it.
There go those expectations again.
I think if we're talking about creating an environment for executives to be at their best, if it's a democratic process of podcasting doesn't feel over the top, it doesn't feel, it doesn't feel like only the executive can afford to video this and get such high production qualities. Like there's something to that. A trusted source is definitely a way of me saying I think people like the idea of podcasting in that it doesn't have a constrained time and it doesn't have a journalist trying to find you out like a traditional radio show or perhaps a traditional TV media spot. And in that regard, the fact that you have time, you allow people to talk openly, and therefore we place a lot more reliance and trust on it. And I'd imagine things like Elon Musk smoking,
Yep. Allegedly,
which he did,
Confirmed.
on a podcast is just another way of saying we can actually, there's something about that, whatever your reaction to that is, there's something about we can trust in that. It happened, we can experience it, we can see that. Anyway, I don't know where to go with that exactly, but...
I'm just wondering what's in that sparkling Pellegrino water now.
No, I
based
know.
on
Who
that.
knows? Who knows?
I've also got some things I want to add to my rider.
Yeah, that's right.
The point about the democratization of the podcast information or the conversation is really important, though, because for executives who actually want to create that authenticity that you spoke about, one of the key challenges is how far do you communicate without sanitizing a message?
Yes.
And by the time you get the newsletter out, you know it's gone through corporate affairs and marketing or, whatever the internal process communications is. And so...
Someone's got to check that font.
Someone has to check the font, and usually some of the messages, as in you cannot say that, cross out. And so,
Redacted.
I will give a plug for the fact that Leadership of Fools is raw and real, and it's unscripted, and a lot of the time it's unedited as well. I say a lot of the time because
It's not completely unedited.
it's not completely, but
Sometimes I go on a very
Yes.
questionable
I know.
rant that is not fit for general
No.
consumption.
There's lots of Rik Brown on the cutting room floor.
I take that
was going
feedback
to
on
say.
board. Look, I can't be censored, except the fact I can literally be censored.
and if you're interested in finding out about Rik Brown, Kurt's on the Kurt's journey
Episode,
into
yes.
darkness is a brilliant one. But getting back to the point, that's a really important one
is
because you're not editing there to sanitize. You're editing for sense in some cases or time, and so it's really really different. And so there's that trust piece that you talked about because a lot of the corporate information that comes out has been sanitized to that degree.
So I don't know. I feel like this is the gold moment. The gold moment around.
I'm mic dropping.
Yeah.
I'm gold.
No,
It's
yeah,
like
I'm loving every moment. It's the ability for an executive, even an executive team, to be in the middle of a half-day meeting, 1 day off-site, 2 day off-site, whatever it might be, even 2 hour board meeting, where they elect to, rather than, they get to the end, they say, okay, what's the takeaways?
Yeah.
How do we want to communicate this to our people?
That's right.
And what you're talking about in terms of the sanitization goes through the amount of layers, the time it takes, and the loss of message.
Sometimes it's the afternoon of the last day of the workshop, which is what are we going to tell our people? That's how long it takes.
Yes.
And no one's deliberately, it's not a misleading piece. It's crafting the story as opposed to going out there and saying...
Someone's got to collate the butcher's papers worth of ideating.
Sounds like you've been to a...
Rik Brown, how do you know all these things?
I know there's all those post-it notes. Damn it, that interactive activity leads to so much, typing up.
Yeah.
But that's the point, isn't it? That you spend all of that time crafting and saying, what are we going to tell our people? And make sure everyone's on point.
Yes.
Because you have executives and you have different styles. Again, there's nothing nefarious in this. It's just the fact that we all communicate differently. So we have different styles. We want to make sure that the message is consistent.
Yes.
So again, there's that piece around podcasts and what it does. It gives you consistent messaging and transparency as well. So,
and I can literally see, and I think this can be happening right now, and maybe it is, but it definitely could be happening a lot more, where the last part of the summing up part of an executive team retreat or board meeting is let's press record.
Yeah.
So we just sum up together, and therefore we could actually then distribute that to our people, and they get not just the messages, they get the nuance.
The nuance. And even beyond the nuance, it's the idea of what leads to that messaging being articulated, because there's a practical thing around, drilling down and getting to a handful of key points. But I love that. It sounds like a really good idea. We should talk to people about that, Colin.
We should, Alice.
We need some sort of platform where we can get that message out.
Has anyone got any ideas?
I hear town halls are awesome. Number 5 on the list is live podcasting is different to the standard keynote speaker or panel. Live podcasting. Ooh,
so this is the picture which does happen. And in fact, one of the delightful things about Leadership of Fools, we've been invited and asked, and lots of inquiries about us doing Leadership Fools type conversations in conferences as a live podcasting experience. So I think that's great for us, but also think it just kind of opens up this idea that a lot of conferences are currently full with keynote speaking moments or panel moments. And, I must admit to seeing a lot of photos of its, stools, a series of 4 stools or 4 comfy chairs. So the next time you're at a conference where you're seeing a panel, picture the chairs actually moving around so the chairs are facing each other. A little bit of audio equipment in the middle, perhaps even something like the audience being in the round, surrounding what's happening, and actually enable a conversation to take place. And I can't help but think that's kind of a live version of sitting around the radio.
Oh, I like it. You say that and I'm on board.
You're on board.
Paint that picture and I will look at that picture.
And the other plus is that you get a takeaway. You get the actual digital product that occurs from that live event.
So I have to say something, and hopefully it's going to be as equally insightful as some of the other things I've said.
Well, she's put pressure on herself now. She wants to drop the mic non-stop.
Can someone save me? Because I feel like now I've just built it up too much.
This is going to be so good.
Oh my gosh, I've forgotten what I'm going to say.
If you only hear one part of this podcast, it must be this part, because this will change your life.
And it only took till 6. What are we up to?
Yeah, we're up to number 5.
How you go?
Number 5.
You guys making fun of me? I'm okay. Lucky this is a podcast called Leadership of Fools, so I know what to expect when I come on.
Trying to figure out how to do a drum roll.
Okay, drum roll, please. So you were talking about the conferences. Okay, important piece coming up. Rick, behave yourself. You were talking about the conferences and the format and what you're picturing.
Yes.
What I was thinking is, we talked earlier about digital. It was the ninth top reason to do a podcast.
Sure was.
And digital is cool.
It's cool.
And I was thinking about how many conferences I've attended, and also I put my hand up and say spoken at as well, because I say that making the comment that I'm going to now, which is there are so many conferences happening now on digital transformation. I'm speaking at something around blockchain in a couple of weeks' time, artificial intelligence, new world of work, HR. There's a whole, you get the idea, there's a whole range.
The future is coming.
The future is coming, the future is here, AI, all of that sort of stuff. And yet we are still attending them and participating in them and delivering them in traditional analog methods, which is you're sitting around the room and you're looking up and there's the presenter. Some of them may be experiencing the stage fright we talked about. And so what happens, the sort of transformation has started with things like interactive, where we're now posting on LinkedIn and Twitter in the moment to promote the conference or the event or the speaker. For the most part, though, the presentations themselves, whether they be panel or keynote or round table, are in largely traditional analogue formats.
With the sound of those little wrapped Mentos lollies popping just every now and again in the audience. People are just trying to ration out their little wrapped Mentos.
So, yeah. And so if you're talking about the cool factor of digital...
I desperately want to drop the mic.
Okay.
Just for you to feel good about this.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, you don't.
Oh,
You
pity!
shouldn't.
He's giving you a pity mic drop.
Is it a pity mic drop?
Oh, Colin, that is almost worse than no
I was
mic
being
drop.
disingenuous.
Yeah,
You were.
I'm
You
actually
were.
sorry.
Never
No,
pity
no,
mic
no.
drop.
No, but I think actually,
That was a
we'll probably
flaccid
edit
mic
that.
drop.
We'll probably edit
No,
that
no,
whole
no,
piece.
no, no,
But
I
it's
think-
there is something there around the fact that and this isn't having a criticism, as I said. I'm going to do a presentation as well, but the way we deliver those, even though there's so much that can be done, which is what you just talked about, should be experimenting with different forums and channels.
And I think if I can extend what you've said, because I think it is actually really onto something, and that's not a pity comment. It seriously is not.
You guys are killing
He's got
me.
his authentic hat on now. I can tell. He's going to save it.
I think there must be something still appealing for us about going to those events.
Absolutely.
In fact, if anything, I think they're becoming more popular than ever.
Yes.
So this podcasting actually is not so radical. Like, it's not so radical to say all of a sudden we're delivering these conferences in purely digital forms.
Yes.
You still get to go to the event.
Absolutely.
You still get to touch and feel
Yes.
and experience the Mentos or whatever it might be.
Yeah, the brownies at morning tea.
You're still going to have your lanyard and...
Yeah.
You better have a lanyard. Oh.
It's the idea of what happens at the conference when you
Yes.
get there and the way that
And
we
what happens
can
after.
present. Yeah.
as a real takeaway. Like, I think even the live event we did in season 1, people were really engaged and
Yes.
quite desperate to actually find out when that was dropping.
Yeah,
Like, because I want
yeah.
to listen to it again.
Yeah.
They left there with a leadership of fool's water bottle. If that's not going to create buzz, I don't know what will. Well played. So we're up to number 4 on the list. It's not scripted. This is the top 10 reason every organisation needs podcasting. It's not scripted. It's more authentic and real. Leaders doing their own stunts. Oh,
Rik Brown, do you remember that quote of yours? Leaders
do.
doing their own stunts?
Oh, yeah. I feel like I don't know how I got credit for it, but I'll take it. I feel like it just sprung up organically during thing. But if I'm getting credit for that quote, then whack
It's
it
a
on the
great one.
CV.
It's a
Whack
very
it
good
there.
one.
Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, has had his moments in his career, and more celebrated than ever as a movie star because he does his own stunts.
That's what his movies are about now. So what's Tom Cruise going to do next?
And there's something just even in that term that just says we're looking for our leaders to be bold, take a risk, be real, make mistakes, be vulnerable, break an ankle, which I think Tom Cruise did,
did,
in
yeah.
his latest movie.
He's trying to get a bit of Jackie Chan action. Yes, and I think podcasting is an excellent forum for doing this, because I guess some of the downside of this, the video sort of delivery and the panel discussions, is that it can have a bit of facade about it, or it can be a little bit we're not seeing behind the curtain sort of
It's
thing.
manufactured.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's often the downside of those sort of things, is that you are getting a message across, but it's through a veneer of production, and we're not getting an authentic sense of who you are when you're delivering this message. Whereas I think podcasting has proven time and time again that we can sort of we can get behind that. The microphone and the intimate atmosphere can really disarm and bring all those facades down.
Well, in the conversation a lot of organisations are having, which is how they transform and digitise and, innovate to either remain competitive or create new competitive advantage, you have to be willing to experiment and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and we've talked about that on previous podcasts. The whole idea of this piece is that you actually are doing that, and that's a really interesting testament. To me, it's the whole idea of you're walking the talk.
Yes.
As opposed to standing up somewhere or in a meeting and saying, I give you permission to go and try something new.
Yes.
And then again, you're delivering it via the same traditional methods.
It's great. Thank you.
Number 3. Oh, we're getting down to the business end, guys. We're getting down to the business end. It's so perfect for leadership programs. How so?
I have this picture, and this is very much in my world of working in organisations to build leadership capability and development programs and experiences. And what you have is often the experience of someone going off-site to, again, maybe a keynote speaking event or a workshop, and they come back from that experience full of ideas, usually full of enthusiasm, optimism, and often the people back in the organisation are looking for the training effect that will only last 24 hours, 48 hours, and then that will go away, that optimism. And especially for organisations that invest in programs over periods of time, 3 to 6 months, 12 months even, there is something about finding the bridge or the connection between maybe the events, the more formalised events. And podcasting seems just like a sweet spot for that. Alice, do you want to take that a little further?
So when I think about leadership programs, I think, again, I don't know why it's a theme for me today, which is the traditional, and I do not want to create the impression that there is something wrong with traditional methods. I guess I am in the digital space, and we are talking about podcasts. So in that mindset, that's the context in which I am making the comments today. I think also, again, leadership programs spend a lot of time on the content.
Can I sign this disclaimer?
Yeah, yes, please do. I have seen, I've participated in many of those programs over the years, and I've seen how they've developed in terms of the maturity of concepts, which I think is fantastic. And
there's good stuff in there.
There is a great, and so this is even the thing around, how the idea of leadership has evolved, and so this whole thing of agile learning, for example, and adaptive organisations, we were not talking about these as concepts even 5 years ago. And different leadership approaches and things like that. It's great that we're having those conversations. I think with leadership programs, and what we don't necessarily do is enough experiential learning that gives people opportunities to experiment with some of these formats in a way that allows them to feel safe. And leadership programs are all about experimenting, because you're there, going in, that maybe you're going to have to do some awkward role play.
Yes. Yes.
You've probably done a 360.
So instead of a role play, a podcasting conversation about a leadership topic.
Yeah.
That is something where you feel the nerves that kick in. Well, I'm actually going to be on air, or I'm going to have a microphone in front of me. But it's safe enough.
It's safe,
To be able we can contain it. But it's a great learning experience.
And it gives you an artifact.
Yes, and an artifact.
When you leave, to talk about that. So when you talk about, adaptive organisations and how you bring transformation back into your teams, the idea of going on a leadership program is that you actually, return as a more holistic leader. And so the idea is that you shape some of that back into the team and say, hey, look, this is what I did, and share that within the organisation, so they can actually get an insight into what happened, the experience, and see some of those things that you might be coming to terms with as a leader as well. And I made the point earlier, you're walking the talk.
Yeah.
So when you come back and say, this is what we're going to do, there's probably a bit more of a conviction that it might actually happen, which is different from, just putting something down on a piece of paper.
I'm glad you extended that.
Okay.
Seriously, it helps. That part helps.
In summary, you gots to podcast.
You gots to podcast.
You gots to podcast. Number 2 on the list is because we make you look good. That's right, we do.
Rik Brown.
Yes.
One of the things I'd offer about the format that is Leadership of Fools is, a lot of people have said to me, I like you've got a comedian involved, and that's
in quotation marks, comedian.
Yeah,
he's a guy.
I've said, who's that?
He's a guy. If the comedian is the person who doesn't know much about business in the sense that he often sounds ridiculous, then yes, he's a comedian.
I dare say there might be a few of us in there wearing that label.
And as much as I say, yep, that was a deliberate strategy or that was a deliberate part of the format, the more deliberate part of the format was the art form of improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, in fact, a great thing that I just heard recently is somebody said, is it really scripted or is it really improvised? Like, how much does an executive actually prepare? I said they prepare to the extent that we do tell them the topic.
Yeah, let him have a think about it.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky. Well,
Depends how organised Colin is, isn't
yeah,
that right?
that's probably
Isn't
a good
that right,
factor,
Rik?
actually. It depends on how busy I am doing other things.
I don't read any of the emails Colin sends me because I like to be a blank slate. I like to come in just like as sort of unbiased as I can be. I don't want to have thought about anything.
So circling back, it's less about the comedy, it's more about the art form that is improvisation.
Yes.
And the principles around that. And those principles are fundamentally based on making each other look good.
Yes. 100%.
And therefore, what I would, and again, this is probably the most deliberate sell in this particular podcast episode,
Great.
would be that if you were to work with us as an organisation, we will make you look good. We will set everyone up for success. Both leading up to the podcast and in the conversation.
We will podcast you in a good light.
Yes.
That's what we will do.
I really like that because it speaks to the messages that we've talked about, which is there's authenticity, there's development. I know I've grown, if not throughout this, conversation, then certainly
You might have
through-
gone backwards a little bit. Sure.
No,
a little.
as soon as I started saying that, I thought there could have been some devolution, actually. But there is authenticity and there is development because the whole point of podcasting is that we're having a conversation in a different way that challenges perhaps the boundaries or, our conceptions, some of our biases and so forth. So there's the learning piece. However, as you said, it's all designed to make you look good because it's about everybody succeeding.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the the key principles of leadership, which is how do you succeed in a space that is a little bit uncertain and how do you try new things and be safe? So it's a little bit strange that we're doing that. It's a real paradigm that we're saying, come and we'll record you and broadcast you, and yet you will have opportunity to, experience and be in that context.
Yes. And the nuance, there's a couple of elements of nuance in that making each other look good doesn't mean that we won't face moments where we disagree and there might be very different perspectives, and nor does it mean that there won't be a moment when it might even feel more like a debate, but fundamentally the conversation aim is to create an environment where everyone can be themselves and who they are, and we're not trying to set you up to fail or find you out or test you. It's kind of the antithesis. I can't even say that word. Antithesis of that.
Nailed it.
Best version of yourself, I think, is a really good way to say that.
Yeah, and having sat on and been a part of this particular podcast for, we're into the second season now, and I've seen quite a few conversations now, and I think every single conversation that has occurred with all the different combination of executives, everyone at some point in the conversation has light shed on a specific area, or they start to think about something in a way that they weren't thinking about it before. Like you, in this conversation, you had some mic drop moments, some golds where you generally, I think he teared up at one point. Just to have, something...
New insight.
New insight. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Every conversation that I've been witness to, I've seen someone experience new insight at some point in the conversation, sometimes multiple times. And this format seems to really enhance that or allow that or encourage that.
The other thing I've loved is when you often think about the hosts being the ones who ask the questions, but it's often the executive asking questions of each other and or of us. So
I'm often too busy thinking about my radio plays and my wireless art installations. I get very distracted mid-conversation. So I'm not the best person to keep things on track, to be fair. So a lot of the time the guests have to do a lot of the questions.
There's a lot of heavy lifting involved in
that's
these
true.
conversations.
I thought I was coming along to be a guest. I've ended up being the host.
I know.
I've ended up being...
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
My nickname is Deadweight. Rik Deadweight Brown. And but I feel like sometimes you need that weight on a windy day. I'm the anchor.
Sometimes.
On a ship, you need an anchor. Maybe that's what I am. There's not much difference between a dead weight and an anchor.
No,
is
there's
there?
not.
I have nothing to add.
Nothing more.
There
Nothing more.
there is nothing that can follow.
Now, there must be a number one.
We are up to number one on the top 10 list of reasons every organisation needs podcasting. And sadly, in our ramshackle way, we have no number one. I think we miscounted our top 10 list in
Who put this list together?
In some way. We've rounded.
You know what the really scary
We got
thing
9
is?
points and we just rounded it down, rounded it up to top 10. For the
Alice,
sake
do you know
of
what
it.
my first job was?
I'm scared. No.
Accountant.
No.
No, I think
Is
it's.
this your list, Colin?
I think it's
my
a
list.
Is that where you're going with that?
I think it's a deliberate strategy from Colin, though, because I think the number one reason, I think it's different for everyone. You know, it's up to you. It's up to you to decide
Yes.
what is the number one reason that
Rick,
podcasting.
you know me so well. And you make me look good.
Hey, so I think number one is blank. It's like the time that the Time magazine had a mirror on their front cover because everyone who was looking at it was the person of the year. You know, that's what we're saying. The number one reason every organisation needs podcasting, you tell us.
I like that.
You tell us.
What do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, we'll come in there and you can tell us. Each organisation can give us their number one reason.
So not only am I a guest, I'm a host. And now I have to tell you the content. Oh, my goodness.
Well, like we said, this is a conversation, and with conversations, you never quite know where things are going to go.
Yeah.
And there is surprising joy, concern,
Yeah.
and horror in the discovery of
Yeah.
what that conversation
I
would
am
look like.
actually worried about the listener experience right now. That
Why?
they will have been enjoying. I love a top 10. I love a top 10 countdown.
Yeah.
And the letdown that we've
No.
just experienced right now by
It's
not
all right.
actually having a number
No,
one.
I'm going to go back through in post and I'm going to re-record and I'm
You
going
will
to change all of them. Every time I say top 10, I'm going to change it to 9. So it's going to say the top 9 reasons every organisation all through the podcast. And so it'll be fine.
Thank
no one
you.
will even know.
Thank you. That will make me feel a lot better.
I'm actually okay with
Yeah,
this.
the top 9.
You're okay.
I'm actually okay with this
I can
because
tell.
Yeah.
I look too chilled, like I don't really understand what's happened. You
The
think
lesson
she's
here,
a bit
everyone.
slow this afternoon.
Life
Does she
is
realise
disappointing.
we're unsure?
All right? Life is disappointing, guys. Get used to it.
No, but life throws you curveballs.
That's right.
And sometimes you think there's going to be 10 things happening and there's only 9.
There's only 9.
And this is what leadership is all about, which
Yeah.
is how you're going to handle. This is situational leadership happening right here.
We
Just
don't
a
wanna
bunch of fools talking about it.
We don't want to spoon feed our audience all 10 reasons.
So you guys know I love food because we podcasted together and I talk about food all the time, which is
We'll not stop talking about food.
I like food. And I like the idea that we've talked about podcasts being conversations.
Yes.
And I like the idea that we've talked about conversations taking you anywhere. And so my favourite kind of concept is a leadership conversation and also then a dinner table conversation because that gives you a different sense of intimacy and there's that whole piece of informality, which is a little bit different from how organisations traditionally operate. So I don't know.
Especially organisations. I think it's that kind of sense we're in that fast food fix. And the opposite is almost the degustation part.
Yeah.
That sense of that we get small nibbles, we take our time, we get to celebrate every mouthful, we're present with each other. And there's nuance to it, there's subtlety to it, versus just the fast food fix where is the soundbite of the conversation.
Yeah.
It's not even a conversation,
It's
really.
not, yeah, it's just the thing that happens. So it sounds like something like what you're saying is...
Are you saying that podcasting is the degustation to the ever-present fast food fix?
Yes, I am.
Absolutely.
Quote.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that was the top 10/9 reasons every organisation needs podcasting. Thank you so much for all of your contributions. Hopefully, very little of it will be edited out, as per my stipulations contractually. I'm hoping that Alice doesn't get into the editing suite and leave me on the cutting room floor, as per usual. But nice working through this list with you too.
Oh, thank you, Rick. I will be staying away from the editing room, so I will leave that onerous and very time-consuming task to someone else.
It all stays. It all stays.
Mic drop.
Well, that was
Excellent.
clearly a pen, Colin.